Ladies and gentlemen, very, very warm welcome from Wantage Cafe Scientifique. Sally, really nice to see you, and welcome back for another talk to the group. Thank you everybody who's joined the call. Thank you, Faith, for all the hard work behind the scenes on this. And we were saying earlier, we got people queuing to speak to Wantage Cafe Scientifique these days. So really looking forward to Sally's talk tonight. And we love to be sort of topical and on message. So Sally, I'm showing up on my screen a book I'm reading at the moment called Feeding Britain by a guy called Tim Lang, distinguished author. And what I really enjoyed was finding on page 199 a section titled, "What is meant by sustainability?" What we want to know is whether you nicked that from him or he nicked it from you. The question for you before we start, you describe yourself as a prototype engineer. And can you take yourself off mute? Or shall I? Oops.
There you go, it should work now.
Oh, well done, Sally. Yeah, it is your reference to yourself in your bio as a prototype engineer. Is that from your automotive days, or does that extend to prototypes beyond?
No, so I mean, I'll go into it in a little bit, but basically automotive, well, mechanical and electrical is sort of my two main foundations. But even when I was at JLR and Aston stuff, I predominantly did prototypes. So I'm kind of, if I was a design engineer, I'd be a solutions architect. So yeah, it's just job titles. I'm a doer. So I think, you know, if there's a problem, I come up with a solution. So that's kind of what I do.
Great. Now, nobody who listened to your talk last time on autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles could possibly forget your description of some of the hazards involved in electric power and big batteries. And I have it printed on my mind, the danger of a dog peeing on a battery. I'd just like to check before we start that hopefully no dogs will come to any harm during this talk.
Hopefully not, no. So, yeah. It peed up a substation, but it was, yeah, got a bit of a shock.
Yeah. In which case, I think we should get started, and over to you, the Living Lab, Sustainability, Living Oxford. Over to you, Sally.
Brilliant, thanks, John. So for those who don't know me already, so my name's Sally, and as John said, so I'm here tonight sort of with my Living Oxford hat on, and I'll explain in a minute what Living Oxford is. And tonight we're going to talk about how being kind can change the world, as in the scientific reasons behind it. So who am I? I'm one of the directors of Living Oxford. We're Oxfordshire's living laboratory, although we're actually a bit more than that. I was the winner last year of the Women in Engineering Societies. I'm one of their top women in sustainability engineering, and I'm predominantly a prototype and sustainability engineer. This was not the photo that went to press, clearly, but it's the one that I like the most. So this was only I can win an award in a year where I don't get to go for a free meal or anything. My award got UPS to me, and the poor photographer was on a ladder about 7 meters away from me with a very big zoom. Yeah, only I can win in a year where I don't get anything for free. But it's but yeah, I was very, very proud of that moment. So before we kind of launch into the presentation, I just want to kind of let you know a little bit about what a living lab is. Although we're a little bit more than that, but a living lab is defined as sort of a user-centered open innovation ecosystem. So it's normally based on a co-creation approach. So we integrate research and innovation processes in real life communities and settings. So the whole point is, and we live in a lot of people talk about the science veil, which is as an area that we proudly live in. But you tend to have certain blockers, as I'm sure John knows from some of his clients and on the campus, where you have very academic and research based. You have commerce, you have very early feasibility and ideas, but sometimes all those things that go all the way through what we call the technical readiness level, so TRLs. And what we do as a living lab is we're about pushing that innovation through to the end to come up with something that comes out of the sausage machine, as I always say. So a real tangible thing comes out of that innovation and research process. So living labs are practice driven. They facilitate and foster open collaborative innovations, as well as real life environments or arenas. So, at Harwell, for example, obviously there is lots and lots of research going on and lots of laboratory style projects. We're about open innovation. So we're about really capitalizing on sharing information and sharing data to basically make the world a better place, or our communities a better place. We operate as intermediaries among citizens, research organizations, companies, regions, citizens, and it's about co-creation, rapid prototyping, validating, upscaling of innovations and businesses. And we have lots of living labs have very common elements, but we have multiple different ways of implementing those. Living Oxford is a little bit different. So we we've been tasked by HMG to actually put together the network of living labs for the UK. So we're more about the framework and how things work together and really pushing the agenda. So a lot of living labs are still stuck in very much a research environment and research zone. Whereas when we set up Living Oxford or Living Oxfordshire, it's a not-for-profit organisation. It's funded by our members. For example, Harwell campus is one of our founding members, but we have local authority on board with us. So Oxfordshire County Council and City Council are both members, and Cherwell. And we have big PLCs. So we have people like Siemens we work with, and Ocado and EDF. Then we have like the smaller incubation of SMEs. We work with defence. So we basically all work together to share either data, ideas and innovation to solve a problem and make a solution out of those ideas. So that's kind of what we do as the Living Lab. So I want to firstly do a bit of a recap. So 2020 wasn't that long ago. It's been over 12 months now since COVID-19 was officially declared by the World Health Organization as a pandemic. And it's been, and in a mere month of that declaration, we were in a national lockdown. Just a reminder, because as our front pages are full of other news today, just a reminder of kind of what it looked like coming up to a year ago. Lockdown Britain, we're all under house arrest, fines, gathering bans, and this is all before it got complicated. So this is before we had tiers and numbers and, can you go out, in, out, whatever was going on. So we've had 53 weeks of disruption in our society. At the time we were told it was 12 weeks to turn the tide. Our peaks look nothing like a sombrero. I think they look more like the Peak District at the moment. And, it's been, if you look at it from a science perspective or a communications perspective, it's been interesting. I won't get political tonight because there's no pub to go to afterwards. But obviously we started on the 16th of March. Obviously all sort of non-essential travel stopped, and the obviously 23rd of March was the actual official lockdown. And if you look at the bottom right hand corner, we're kind of here. Here's our lovely destination map. So we've come all through this and we're sitting here at the 9th of March now. Kids went back yesterday. All parents did a huge sigh of relief. We're probably still sighing. And in that time, a huge amount of things happened, which actually give us some insight into what the world could look like. So you probably hear a lot of people talking about normal, new normal, build back better, green recovery. But what does that really, really mean? So these were the kind of messages that we were being thrown at us. So wash your hand, and we've talked to people to get these words. So washing your hands. I quite like clean your knockers to help your postman. That was always quite good fun. Took me back to sort of Benny Hill days. That did. People were vulnerable. There was death. Don't go out. Or don't go out as we called it in this house, because it all got a bit confusing. People were shielding. There was rising poverty. Click and collect, dropping at the door became a really big thing. We became more reliant on our couriers than we'd ever been in our lives, and I suddenly know them all by name and their lives and their dog names and everything. There were tears and roadmaps. There were infections, and these were sort of words that we were hearing minute by minute, day by day. And while social media has lots of advantages, it also has lots of disadvantages. But then opportunities sort of came: flexi working, reduced commuting, supporting local, exercising, family time, improved air quality, new industry creation. Lots and lots of innovation and entrepreneurship was being seen, popping up everywhere, from kitchen tables to big businesses. Green recovery, and this word that we keep hearing, a new normal. What is a new normal? What were the positives people said that they sort of remembered, especially from that first lockdown? Because I'm not saying the last lockdown had any positives whatsoever. The first one definitely was more enjoyable, personally. Living outside, hearing the birds, enjoying sunshine, no air traffic. That's one a lot of people, especially who lived further up towards Brize Norton and stuff, really suddenly noticed. Probably a bit like people who were living under the Gatwick and Heathrow routes. Clear skies, looking up. The chance to just look up and look out. Watching spring, actually physically getting to watch nature, watch the world around us. A summer at home, more time together. Then obviously there is the negatives: isolation, negative mental health, loneliness, forced bubbles, which we now know, obviously the increase of abuse and violence, poverty, vulnerabilities, incoherent communication, and increased suicides and depression. But what does this outbreak actually mean for us? So we've seen big, widespread change in human behavior. Companies and businesses have had to rapidly alter how they work and how they function. Even our government has had to think about how it works, all the way to our local councils, embracing Zooms. I'm sure we probably could have repaid the country's debt endlessly if we had a penny for every time we said you're on mute, turn off your mute. No, you're still on mute. It's that button there. The debate between Teams and Zoom and all this kind of stuff. But what it meant was actually, so I've worked for lots of companies before where actually being seen to be working from home was seen as being lazy. There was a lot of distrust about working from home. A lot of people want to see you at your desk, during these certain times. And actually, we've proven we can keep businesses and economies going. And in fact, productivity in some businesses has been much higher by having people working from home. I'm not saying that the constant Zoom schedule is ideal. And obviously we now know Zoom fatigue is a thing. It's got its own word and everything. And but what it did mean for a lot of us was that, it was reducing congestion. It was adding time back into your life. I mean, when I used to work in the Midlands, that was nearly a 2 to 2.5 hour commute every day each way. So suddenly people had time. There was enhanced air quality. To give you an idea on the air quality, 100 days from the 23rd of March, before we went back into the new normality, as it was being called, before we went into tiering. So the DEFRA air quality sensors and the Met Office showed that in that 100 days post-lockdown, so that was the 23rd of March to the 30th of June, with the same period for the previous 7 years, that actually there was a drop in nitrogen oxides by 50%, which is massive. However, we did also find that ozone layers increased, so by 10%. And the levels of sulfur dioxide more than doubled across the country. This was driven obviously by a complex balance in the air chemistry. And one of the other things that then happened was the Met Office was really forecasting low humidity. And obviously that's a result of the change in nitrogen oxides and their interactions with other pollutants that are normally in the air. And also vehicle use in that 100 days dropped to 23% of normal levels in the country. And I think that first 100 days is where we all saw the biggest change. And in all the other lockdowns and tierings and other complicated words, whatever we're doing since, we haven't seen anything that was as dramatic as that first 100 days. All right, so just bear that in mind, that compliance in your head. So obviously during these periods, especially at the beginning of the outbreak, people had to alter their behaviors. There was lots of either actual or perceived risks. You're dealing with basically something that's invisible. And at the beginning, something we didn't really know how it was transmitting or how it was spreading. And what is still remain to be seen is whether these behaviors that were adopted, especially in that first 100 days, will actually trigger long-term change. However, obviously, there was an effect on economic activity, and there's an urgency to look at how we redesign for sustainability, and we'll talk more about sustainability in a minute, to minimize pollution and the spread of disease. So we showed in a very short period of time that change can happen, but obviously it's not sustained change. And there was this brief recovery. So a lot of people might have seen images of Venice, and they said about in Venice that the water has been cleaner and clearer than it had been in lifetimes, sort of some of the older residents, and it was just phenomenal. And this is a city, the likelihood is Venice in some of our lifetimes will start to be evacuated, and suddenly this city that's known for its smells and pollution, like my dad always says, never go to Venice in July. And it's always July when I want to go to Venice, because apparently it reeks. Cities were starting to rewild themselves in the sense that wildlife was returning into the streets, and it was more widely seen and around, and obviously with a lot less cars on the road, things could thrive, and roads no longer were a danger to animals. They became crossing points, and obviously in India, I mean, the air pollution, and also in China, was staggeringly reduced, unfortunately not anymore, and visibly those smogs started to very, very quickly disappear. So there was a brief recovery. So there was a brief point of, if we combine that lack of movement, lack of airbound pollutants, mostly from emissions, and also industry, so manufacturing, and behavioral patterns changing, there was a glimmer of what society could be like. So what changed? So we had time to think. So we suddenly, we could walk, we could focus on our well-being. Some people did Joe Wicks, some people didn't. The idea for that for me was hell, but I know some people really loved it. We grow veggies, people weren't driving. I think some people have forgotten how to drive, judging on the roads the last few days. We learned to connect in different ways, virtually. Teaching my dad to use Zoom over FaceTime was interesting, but he's there now and participating in weekly quizzes. We enjoyed space in a different way. And let's remember, we are very blessed where we live here. We don't live in tower blocks with no access to outdoor space. There's space all around us. People trying new hobbies, being at home with their family. They had time to chat on the phone, read a book, cook and bake, all these sorts of things. Banana bread, I think, was a big thing at one point, and sourdough competitions seem to be popping up everywhere. But it's that point of, we had time. So if we reflect back to before the lockdown, and I know I've certainly reflected on my own life, are we living lives that are sustainable? And what impact were those busy lives having on our health? So I know there's more projects that obviously their research will continue over the next couple of years about how people's blood pressure was being, had been reduced during lockdown, other issues that are stress or environment related. It's going to really going to come in 24 months, I think, that show actually, if we evaluate how we live, if we read how we work and move, what that impact will be on our physical health, as well as the health of the environment around us. So, and some people, I think even the Queen came out and had a little chat about it. I know we're not supposed to mention royalty, but we'll just mention her for 2 seconds, because, even she came out, and there was lots of referring this back to sort of the war, which I wasn't alive in, but just how people came together. And in fact, our own community where I live in Hendreds actually preempted a lot of the stuff before the government said we're going to form volunteer services, and lots of groups naturally got together and started with this foundation of kindness, helping each other. So whether that was, making sure your next door neighbor who maybe doesn't use the internet could get food shopping, or registering our neighbors with the when the vulnerable status thing came out, so you could get supermarket slots and things like that, and just sort of these, you know, Harwell helpers, you know, Hendred's community friends, you know, the mix with the bags delivering to people's houses, pockets of just kindness popping up everywhere. We all clapped for the NHS, even Boris, who frankly should have his hands cut off for only giving them a 1% pay rise. But, you know, people were out and people helping all around the world. So, you know, there was no PPE. People were running out of uniforms in the NHS. And suddenly seamstresses from all over the country were making uniform bags and scrubs and, and, you know, people were sharing goods. So where restaurants and things had to suddenly shut down really quickly, and that food was being shared. Now, normally in our normal lives before lockdown, that food would have just gone to waste, you know. So suddenly there was people had time to stop and think, and whether it was from the stress or a distraction or whatever, but actually pockets and small acts of caring and kindness popped up everywhere. And even the kindness of just smiling at someone or saying hello on the street has the potential to really make an impact on someone for that moment. So all of those little bits of kindness all stacked up. And I'm sure we've all got stories of something that happened, you know, to us or around us or near us or we were involved with. So never, too often we underestimate the power of listening or just saying hello or sharing or smiling. And these are foundation moral principles that we teach our children at primary school and at kindergarten. And suddenly, at some point in our adult life, they get lost. So I'm just going to show you a quick video. So hopefully everyone's got their sound on, about the principle that we're physically made to be kind.
One of the hardest questions when you think about the evolution of the human species from the standard framework of evolution, which really is about individual survival, competing, getting your genes to the next generation. One of the hardest questions within that framework is, why are people so frequently and routinely good and generous and sacrificing, right? And, you know, most people think that Darwin had this idea of survival of the fittest, that really it's the most ruthless and bloodthirsty who really thrive and survive. That is not Darwin's view of human evolution at all. He really felt that sympathy is the strongest instinct that humans have. Communities that have the most sympathetic members will flourish and raise the greatest number of offspring. That notion of Darwin's led to this sense that out of the vulnerability of our offspring emerged, first of all, social structures like cooperative caregiving, and then also physiological systems shaped by evolution to help us take care of the carriers of our genes, our offspring. We have learned from neuroscience down at UCLA that if you feel physical pain, a part of your brain lights up. And if I see you have that physical pain, the same part of my brain lights up. It's as if we're wired to have the same experience of other people. Empathy is this really complicated task. It really engages the frontal lobes, these newer regions of the cortex that are involved in more complex symbolic processes like language and imagining the future. Because empathy requires that you think there's someone else out there who has feelings and thoughts that may be different from mine. That's a really complicated cognitive achievement. In my lab, the Berkeley Social Interaction Lab, we showed images of prototypical suffering to our participants. They trigger massively powerful reactions of compassion. And what we found in the brain is that a very old part of the brain called the periaqueductal gray, which is common to mammals when they take care of things, lights up when you feel compassion. So that tells us compassion is really old in the nervous system, as Darwin speculated. My students and I got really interested in social class. What does it do to the human mind? Our lab and other labs are interested in something called the vagus nerve. It's the longest bundle of nerves in the human nervous system. In our research, compassion, the feeling of caring for someone in need, activates the vagus nerve. Lower class individuals, if we show them images of suffering, they have a vagus nerve response. You don't see that in upper class individuals. It literally is a compassion deficit that's produced by lots of wealth. Next set of studies on charity. Who gives? economic analyses would say, if I have a lot of money, it should be easy to give. If I have $900 in my bank account, giving away money it really matters. It matters what you put in your fridge. And in spite of that, what we find is lower class individuals give more. And this is replicated in studies of philanthropy. One of the things that this science tells us is there is enormous strength in these poorer communities of generosity and empathy that, many people in more privileged circumstances miss. It's strong community. Yeah, 60% of what we do is really about maximizing an individual's personal gratification and desire, just the classic survival of the most competitive. But 40% of the time, we're really doing things for other people. And we sacrifice and we risk exploitation and we still do it. And not only that, but it actually becomes personally fulfilling and inspiring to engage in that work. We find these secondary delights in acting on behalf of others. And I think that it really requires that we have to redefine human self-interest. The great ethical traditions have always been encouraging this. And now we're seeing the science say, yeah, the brain really cares about other people.
So if we're wired to be kind, then why is it sometimes that being kind is seen as a weakness, or it's sometimes it's being seen as giving something away? And what I want to challenge is that did the pandemic show this wave of kindness, this wave of compassion, and in a way like reconnect that part of our brain, which we're naturally, unless we're very, very rich, as the professor said, that means we want to care and we want to share and we want to be kind. And as Barack Obama said, there's nothing weak about kindness and compassion. So at UCLA, as the professor mentioned, there is a kindness institute, which just to me sounds like the best place to be in the world. So they looked at kindness and about how it spreads. And the bottom line that they found is that actually kindness is really contagious. Sorry, I haven't got COVID, don't panic. So even witnessing an act of kindness, as they were saying, even between strangers, can make us feel better about our world. And it can make us more inclined to perform acts of kindness ourselves. So, and when we're kind and when we give, we get this natural state of elation. And then obviously all these happy neurons and all these synaptic transmissions go on and happy hormones. And we get a warm feeling and sometimes goosebumps and sometimes even tears. I don't know about you guys, but I can't watch telethons anymore. I can't watch things like Comic Relief and stuff, because actually I can't cope with watching the level of suffering of people in places that I can't physically go and help them. So I just make a blanket donation at the beginning, and then just, I physically can't be confronted with that much unkindness in the world, because it just makes me want to give everything to be as kind as I can. So did we witness the perfect storm of kindness? So contagious kindness comes from obviously witnessing other people do things. So in the pandemic, did we then witness a case of contagious kindness? Again, strengthened by the use of technology and media, because we weren't exactly going down the pub and talking about it. And again, that spread of rapid communication obviously creates a contagious, viral spread. Because on the 6th of April, Captain Tom, God rest his soul, he wanted to do 100 lengths of his garden. By his birthday, on the 30th of April, he'd raised £30 million. Okay. That money has now gone over £39 million for NHS charities. So was this the perfect storm of kindness? So when people aren't preoccupied with everything else going on in their lives, all those things that we normally have to do every day, and actually you've got the opportunity to stop and look at what's going around you and read things and engage with things and then listen. So, if you saw someone on social media who just donated £5 to Captain Moore, does that then make you want to donate it? Because you see that as an act of kindness and you see his physical act as kindness. So therefore you add your penny to the pot. And that attaching the help to the kindness as well, because one of the things that the pandemic did and any crisis does is it instills the need in many of us to want to help and come up with a solution. So this is called pro-social contagions. So we can conclude that obviously kindness can stimulate kindness. We've seen it in action. We've been living in this amazing living laboratory of ourselves for 53 weeks. We've seen that there are those predisposed to kindness, forming community groups, baking breads, helping neighbours, organising quizzes, coming up, engaging in new discoveries, paying it back. So what if we apply this crisis point kindness to our planet? So our planet is in crisis, okay? It's not screaming at us. It's not currently stabbing us through the feet, but it is in crisis. So one of the things that this virus did is this virus had no boundaries, okay? It didn't need a passport. It spread from person to person, plane to plane, journey to journey, with one mission. That one mission is to survive. Anyone on this call who's a scientist in virology, a virus needs a host to survive. And it needs you to keep living, because if you die, it dies. So, the virus has no intention of you dying. It just happens that you can't cope with it. And so therefore everybody, all ends badly for all parties involved. But there's a lot of synergies between COVID-19 and humans to how sustainable life is. So if you depict us humans as the virus, what have we actually done to our host, planet Earth? So our planet is in a state of despair. So how can we turn and create kindness and inspire kindness into a new normal and turn that into a more sustainable way of living? I challenge you all to be a kindness contagion, and can you create antidotes to the toxins that we've created as a society? And could this kindness contagion, and what could it do, and how could it be sustainable in a new normal? So let's talk a bit more about sustainability and kindness. So let's talk about sustainable communities. So a sustainable community manages its human, natural and financial capital to meet the current needs, while ensuring that there's adequate resources for future generations. So it's basically about not absorbing everything, not using everything up. And there's lots of sustainability modeling. There's donut economics. There's, sustainable cycles. The UNEP has got, I can't remember how many it is, but X amount of sustainable development protocols. So here's one of them. So this is the United Nations Sustainability Circles. And I always like this one because it's quite pretty. But basically, it's based on some fabulous circles, and there's Venn diagrams, and there's all sorts of stuff you can go off and Google around sustainable communities. But it comes down to economics, ecology, culture, and politics. And obviously, it's all about the measurement of those on this sort of matrix about how they all fit together and where there's an imbalance. And normally that imbalance is around ecology, because if you want high economics at the moment, then obviously that's driven by politics. Our culture was just to work, absorb, consume, and that has a negative effect on our ecology. So if all these effectively need to get to the point they're all vibrant and they're all happy and they're all green, and there's offsets and balances and issues, which we'll go into in a minute. So a sustainable world or a sustainable community is based on 4 points. So the first is leadership, engagement, and responsibility. So we have to get to the point that everybody feels that they have an opportunity to participate in and influence decisions, okay, that will affect their lives. All right. So a little secret for everyone in the room, if they don't know already. So I've done lots of things in my career and my life to try and influence decisions. And it's got to the point that I've realized the only way to truly influence decisions is to be elected, which I hate politics and I hate politicians. So I'm standing as a candidate in the county council elections, which scares the absolute bejeebies out of me, because I'm probably going to get an ASBO in my first week at a council meeting. But I want to stand up for my community and I want things to change. So if I get a tag, John, I'm hoping that you'll come and release me, which would be great. People need to realise, and they have to have adequate access to public information. No more fluffing with words. Everything needs to be plain English. No more making things unreachable and unobtainable. Okay. So I'm tired of seeing political systems where, it's like, oh, you don't need to know about that. Just focus on this. Yeah. Or you don't need to understand this planning protocol because you'll never change it. So just focus on this. And in fact, we proved a couple of weeks ago, so community groups got together. And in fact, we managed to get the planning for Valley Park, which is a big, awful expansion of Great Western Park. We managed to get it deferred based on the principles of healthcare, active travel, sustainability and biodiversity. Now, how long we can hold the roof from the door for, who knows, but it shows you that actually when empowered, community groups can make great things. If you take away the red tape and you take away the inaccessibility to influence decisions and you empower individuals to make change, you're working towards a sustainable world, okay? You need viable non-governmental sectors. You know, these quangos have to disappear. We have to make sure there's equal access to funding for NGOs that do good and spread kindness. We need respect and tolerance. We need to encourage everybody, all ages, all genders, all orientations, to take responsibility. We need political stability. Okay, so even in supposedly a stable Western civilization, we don't have political stability because everything swings in the wrong directions. And we mustn't compromise the sustainability of other communities. We have to work collectively. Ecological integrity. The environment is key. You know, there's a point every year where we've used up our Earth's resources, and it's normally around June, July time. So by that point, in a whole 12 months, we've used up what we have, or what the planet has for us. I think it was 6 weeks delayed last year because clearly we weren't absorbing at the rate we normally absorb. But every human has the right to clean water, air, and nutritious, uncontaminated food. We face huge ecological disasters coming. The pandemic has got nothing on climate change. You know, if we were doing death tolls for climate change, you know, that data thing that you can log into would look horrendous. That dashboard would be horrific. We have to protect our local, regional, and national ecosystems and our biological diversity. We have to stand up for our planet. You know, be the Lorax. You know, we have a responsibility as custodians for this planet. We have to conserve our natural resources. We have to really maximize reduction of waste. There was some great news this week that 2 of our councils were in the top 5 of you know, recycling. So recycling is great. So that's a good achievement. But now we need to reduce and we need to reuse, you know, and repair. We need to, you know, utilize technology to minimize pollution emissions. And we have to make sure that, you know, we use renewables, but not at the rate they can't be renewed, which is what we're currently doing in some situations. Economic security, obviously, is key. And we're on a brink. You know, the pandemic will push our economy to a point. We have to reinvest resources in our local economy. I cannot stress enough how important it is to spend your money as locally as you can. And that is not spending it at the local Sainsbury's or the, you know, or the local Waitrose. That is spending it on your high street. Okay, in whichever way that is, whether that's your high street online or your high street physically, your shops around you. Because once we lose our local economy, we lose the ability to be truly sustainable, because your local economy but puts more back into your community than anything else around you. You don't see Argos sponsoring your local football team, or putting banners up around the cricket pitch, or paying for, you know, some kids to get the bus for a school trip. It also means meaningful local employment. And obviously, the more local people are employed, the less they have to travel. And also, you know, keeping ownership of businesses, so not losing something, and really valuing our self-employed employers who help obviously create opportunities. And we have to look at training and education. We currently have an education system that is post-industrial, and we need to look at an education system that values creativity, sustainability, and entrepreneurship for the new world. And social well-being, and this is so important, reliable food supply. So if anybody can remember back to the madness that was December, pre-leaving the European Union officially, there was 3 days of madness at Dover, which ends up being far more than 3 days. But just to give you an idea, we only ever have 3 to 5 days of fresh fruit and veg in this country, because we're an island and we don't produce everything we need to survive, or, you know, for having a nutritious diet. So, you know, we have to focus on reliable local food supply that optimizes local production. That means we have to stop building developments for greed and not for need. So this whole just agenda of hundreds of thousands of homes has to stop. because we're currently using up our land for growing food on at a rapid rate. I was really disheartened reading the environmental report for Valley Park that the soil quality of the land that's about to be absorbed by 4,300 plus homes is actually some of the best growing soil in South Oxfordshire. But that's fine, yeah, and because they're just going to put houses on it, and there's X amounts of hundreds of millions coming to the council, and that will just feed some other big deficit. And it's all we're doing is plugging deficit after deficit after deficit, and we have to get to the point we just stop. We have to have access to adequate health, and health has to change. And the health service has taken a real, obviously a battering, obviously, but it's really had to think about how it delivers health services. And we've seen a rise in telemed. We've been involved with projects around delivering medicines using drones and delivering COVID tests using drones. And we have to make sure that all people have access to a high quality of education that's not just a postcode lottery. You want to feel somewhere that is safe, and it's safe from crime and aggression. And I was at the Great Western Park Residents Association meeting last night, and I was disheartened to hear that on a new estate, they're facing crime daily. There's now no entry orders and stuff on people's homes, and it's like this ideology of a new estate that people bought into living in and buying their homes in is already a few years old, and there's already crime and aggression and drug dealing there. And we have to stop this, because if you look at the police statistics when they're released hopefully this summer, you look at that drop in crime in that first 100 days, and you look at why that happened. Because people locked down properly while the message worked. When the message stopped working because people broke the rules, that all disappeared and things went back to whatever the normal was. We have to have people who feel like they belong somewhere, a sense of place and self-worth. These are all basic foundations to me of a moral society, but this is what sustainability is. The arts are so important. Creative expression is key for a sustainable community. Healthy work environments, and we know that the work environment is going to change, and it has to change, and the ability to adapt. And one of the things that we learned in 2020 was how to adapt really quickly. Okay, and we need to carry that with us towards a sustainable world. And we have to put people before profits. We have to work with supply chains, and we have to invest in people, and we have to look at sustainable processes to stop the complete absorption of our natural resources. We have to look at different financial models. We have to rethink the way we live our lives. Okay, massively. We have to have companies giving back to communities. I run a small eco shop in the village here, and I never take a profit. Every single month I give something back to different communities, whether it's buying a chest freezer for a school who wants to stop using catering services and embrace buying local, and that seemed a brilliant idea to me. So they absolutely deserved a chest freezer, to obviously Meals on Wheels for people that were vulnerable at home. And we have to stop thinking that profit is king, and we have to think that actually kindness is the king. We have to put back into our communities, and governments have to change. We should be doing sustainability assessments on every single decision we make. Every government, every policy should be assessed through sustainability modelling, so that they can decide what actions they do or do not take. It made me sick to the back teeth that in the year when we're finally going to have COP26, that in the Lake District there was actually planning permission consultation going on for a new coal mine. None of this makes any sense to me. You can't have lip service green and then just run a black, dirty country. It doesn't make any sense. And businesses that really exemplify, so B Corps and stuff like that, sustainable methods, should get gain from that. They're the ones who should be supported. They're the ones that should get, tax breaks and all this kind of stuff, because they're putting something back into our society and our planet. Whilst Perseverance is doing a great job on Mars, and I'm very much enjoying the selfies, I have no plans to live on Mars. This is my planet. This is where I want to live, and it needs to be fit for my children, their children, and going forwards. We all know the numbers. We all know the problem, the degree rise, and we have to stop that. And sustainable living is a way to do that. So there's a thing called the Happy Planet Index, which is always a good index. So one of the things that we do at Living Oxfordshire all the time is look at different metrics and how we can measure things. So the UK actually ranks 34th in 140 countries on the Happy Planet Index score. Okay. But as you can see, our ecological footprint is pretty pants. Now, you might be looking at this and going, whoa, there's a lot of South America in the green here. You know, I thought they had drug dealers and they have like, you know, cocaine issues and they live in poverty. What's interesting about South America is the way that they value their communities and how they share resources. So the Happy Index looks at things like life expectancy and well-being and inequality, but it validates ecological footprint based on sustainable principles. So if anyone ever gets bored and you want to look up the Happy Planet Index, it's great. Like, I love it. It's one of the, you know, great ways of evaluating the way the world's going. And obviously, as you can see, there's quite a lot of red there into the oranges and, you know, not a lot of green. And ideally, a happy planet should all be green. So I just want to talk a little bit about fixing the world. So if we have all this stuff, so as a solutions designer, you know, the climax of the impending spread of the virus opened up a plethora of discussions between all of us, of new ways of working, principles of carbon reduction, flexible working, improving air quality, sustainable communities, and for local businesses to come to the forefront. But this global pandemic was widely discussed. This wasn't unexpected for many people working in science. So prior to the actual event, we had the forerunners of SARS and MERS, and the rise of Ebola spikes over the last 15 years. As humans encroach on ecosystems, the balance of the planet tips. Okay, so we're overdeveloping, we're oversaturating, and we are putting humans in favor of habitats. Okay, and this pandemic was inevitable. You probably saw in the beginning, Bill Gates was talking about it. There's loads of people that were talking about that when this pandemic was coming. Okay, the only people who didn't seem to think anything was going to happen was our own government. So changes at a national level were slow. Okay, they were slow to be responsive and effective. However, this new wave of support and kindness that manifested in our streets meant that everybody was suddenly taking the responsibility for the health and well-being of others. So there was a massive pendulum shift, going from being selfish, living in our swim lanes, to suddenly worrying about the people around us. Okay, and there's in society, there's always doers and thinkers, and there's always followers and stuff. But those initial people that started that catalyst of kindness, that kindness spread. Okay. You know, with billions locked up, you know, unable to visit friends or go to work, colleges, etc., you know, the flip side to all of this was the struggle. Okay, and the struggle was very real and felt by people in many, many different ways, especially when the physical expression of kindness and compassion could equally bring illness and death. Okay, so a lot of people were very hesitant about, you know, people dropping stuff at their door, and, you know, there's a lot of worries, people putting signs up, don't come near my house, you know, all that kind of stuff. I think we, in some aspects, we were probably sort of just short of lamb's blood being sprayed all over the doors. Our lovely vicar in the village kind of went from lovely vicar to slightly vicar of doom at one point. And, you know, but it was real, the struggle was tangible. So given everything we know then about the fact that kindness is contagious, and the fact that there's core principles to sustainability, that the fact that it takes ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And these aren't extraordinary as in Avengers style superpower changes. These are just us doing something that's different to our everyday normal. Okay. And what is that new normal? So if you want to rebuild the society, we're confronted with the uncertainty of human existence, full stop. Okay. And we now know how vulnerable life really is. Yeah. You can't model these probabilities. You can't, you know, dwell over the uncertainty of our existence, because I'm not a physicist, and that would just hurt my head a lot to worry about it. But this pandemic, and I say this one because I'm sure that in my lifetime there is going to be many more in different ways, has made a lot of people look face to face with the most basic questions of life and what we're actually here for. So now we've got to work through this divide. Okay, so this pandemic has shown the gaps in status and power. It's widened the gap between rich and poor. It's shown us how terrible it is to not recognize the value in our friends. How many times did you cancel a dinner or forget to do a call back to a friend because you're just too busy with your life? Life is sacred, and I think what this pandemic has taught us is you really don't know what tomorrow will bring. Okay, because it's been completely invisible and it could hit anybody at any point in time. But this world is broken. The politics, the social systems, and they only will work going forwards when every citizen cooperates and inputs at the level to make our society work efficiently again.